Hey everyone, and welcome back. Now today I want to talk a little bit more about Jasmy, and specifically if Jasmy can effectively replace data brokers. Now this is something that I think would be a pretty low-hanging fruit for the Jasmy ecosystem based on what they're trying to build and how they're trying to build it overall. But also this is something I think would be very important because as I'm sure you've probably seen, if you've seen my videos before, when I go on my rants about data brokers, this is something that I do think would just be a societal good, and it would be better for everyone involved. Well, maybe not the data brokers, but I do think it'd be better for everybody involved. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So before we get into talking about how Jasmy could potentially replace data brokers, I think it's probably worthwhile to understand what data brokers even are, essentially what they do, and then what problems or what conflicts of interest potentially do they cause, or how are they, in my opinion, damaging to society, and how could Jasmy make this better? So starting out, let's learn about what is a data broker. All right, so data brokers buy and sell your personal information to third-party companies, mainly for commercial purposes. Data brokerage is in high demand because of the information they provide. Statistics show that total data broker revenue will reach nearly $365 billion in USD in 2029. Now, we've seen some stats kind of above and below this area, but I think kind of the general consensus is somewhere between maybe 340 to like 440 billion. A decent chunk of money, and obviously definitely a very large market to consider. So this is something that I think will actually only get bigger as AI gets involved as well, because AI models usually need good data to train on, and if they need to buy that from data brokers, that's something that is very valuable for data brokers to have. This is going to get into a whole future conversation or rant that I guess I'll get on here in a second. But, technically what they do is legal, but ultimately how they collect all of this data from you is through online privacy issues, I would say, right? So we can see that, privacy policies, cookies, terms of service, all this type of stuff essentially make it legal and easy for data brokers to use your information. The information they usually find is, full names, personal professional email addresses, phone numbers, location, coordinates of the users and their employers, which is kind of nuts, professional data, including current and past employment positions, as well as detailed employer information, links to LinkedIn profiles. There's also a lot of other stuff. The other article that we're going to go to in a second covers more of the personal side rather than the business side. This was related to essentially a data breach from Apollo, which happened in 2018, and it leaked 200 billion data points, which is crazy. That's a lot of information that essentially was hacked. And this brings up essentially the problem, which is two things. One, I think data brokers should be illegal because this is your data, obviously technically with cookies and terms, like you're agreeing to have your data harvested, but nobody really wants that. That's just kind of a harsh reality of the circumstance that we're in currently. This is something that affects people's privacy, but it's essentially taking money out of their own pocket, if you ask me. This is our data, and essentially this is being farmed off to these multi-$100 billion industries, essentially to go sell it all, right? This is something that I would say is deeply problematic and troubling with the way things currently are, not only from a privacy situation, but also from essentially taking value that we provide for free and then giving it to somebody else. So this brings up the next question that, is data brokering legal? And yes, technically it is, but there are many efforts to try and help, not necessarily prevent it, but maybe make sure it's done more ethically, because there's a lot of things that happen, and then there's a lot of data that's taken that may not have necessarily been obtained like a completely legal way, but it's also not technically illegal. And so there's been a lot more of these data broker regulations coming in through various states to try and help protect this, but also this is kind of a fundamental issue at its current point, right? And so one thing that I think will help change this is just by implementing something better, right? And I think that something better is Jasmy. We'll get there in a second, but the next thing I want to talk about is essentially kind of how they work, right? And we've kind of already been over this, but ultimately what they're trying to do is they're trying to scrape everything that you do on the internet and then kind of build a personal profile for you, right? So, and this is anything that can be tied to you: names, phone numbers, birthdays, email addresses. Here we can see, financial information, credit history, credit score, income, employment history, online activities, shopping history, purchasing habits, public records. you may already be able to see kind of why this would be valuable, right? Like if you can tell that, they're a so-and-so that is such and such years old, they have this type of credit history, this is their credit score, this is where they work, this is what they do online, and this is how they purchase. Well, now you, like, as an advertiser, you pretty much have everything you need to know, right? Like, you've got your key demographic, you've got essentially their purchasing power, so you know, will they be able to afford your product or not? You know where they are online, so you know exactly where to find them. You essentially know what YouTube or TikTok or whatever videos to advertise on, because you know that's where they're watching. And then also you can see their shopping history. So, are they an impulse buyer? Is this going to be something where they see the ad once and they're going to click buy? Are they going to need to see it for 3 weeks before they buy it? There's a whole lot of different things that you can learn about people's online activity. Now, keep in mind, all of this is being, in my opinion, stolen from us for free. So where they collect all of this is, credit cards, behavior tracking, public records, social media, mobile apps, loyalty cards. There's a whole bunch of different places. And essentially they just kind of aggregate all of this together, which is what gives these advertisers or whoever essentially wants to buy this information essentially a relatively clear picture of who you are and what you do. Now, the next thing that is very disturbing to me is essentially some of the more dystopian or nefarious uses for data brokers. Some of you might say, oh, well, there's harvesting my data and selling it to somebody so they can more accurately track like what I would be apt to buy or something like that, right? Yeah, sure. But also, here is a little paragraph that I found very interesting, and I kind of, guessed that this was something that could have been possible, but I never really imagined that this is what people would use it for. But obviously, why did people not use it for this, right? So it says, if you're not familiar with data brokers, they make up a massive and growing industry that collects, buys, and analyzes personal data and sells it to other companies or groups, which use that information to target messages and advertisements or sell products. I wrote about this sector a few months ago after researchers found brokers selling data about U.S. military personnel and their families with little discretion and for mere pennies. The researchers told me they were shocked at how easy it was to buy sensitive data about military members. Now, obviously, we're focusing on a subsection of the population, which just happens to be maybe potentially a more at-risk population with foreign actors, potentially, I would say, and possibly even terrorist groups. But, this is something that is, I would say, deeply problematic and highlights kind of the need for a privacy solution. And obviously, Jasmy provides that privacy solution. As we've talked about in far more detail in a different video, Jasmy has the personal data locker. Now, the problem with data brokers, like most Web 2 items that we have currently, and the kind of pitch that Web 3 presents for a lot of this stuff, is decentralization, right? If you have a data broker with 200 billion data points for, 100 million different people, this is something that obviously is a very easy and juicy target for hackers. This is just like having a bridge in crypto, right? Like it's the same exact thing. You've got a massive collection of a whole bunch of things sitting in one place, and all you have to do is crack that one thing and you get it all. Right? Where with Jasmy, if everybody has their own personal data locker and it's all anonymized and encrypted and all this type of stuff like they have with their secure knowledge communicator, it makes it a lot harder and therefore a lot less enticing for people to target certain things like this. Because let's say you crack one data locker, well, that's great. You just got somebody's personal information, but now you got to go do it, 100 million more times to have the same level of impact that you would just cracking one data broker's database. So this is how I think Jasmy can kind of weed itself, or self-select, I guess I should say, to be a better solution than data brokers are currently. Now, the way I see this happening primarily is through competition, right? Like, this is something that if data brokers need to have these massive behemoths to collect everybody's data, they obviously have a lot of overhead. They've got a lot of, upfront costs. They've got a lot of analysis. They've got a lot of security issues. They've got a lot of these types of things, where with Jasmy, if people can collect their own data, obviously it's easier for them to collect their own data. They don't need to take the time to piece it all together like these data brokers do. And also, it does make it easier for companies to reach out to these individuals directly and reach out and purchase their data. The other thing that I think we're not considering here is currently I'm not seeing a dime for my data, right? And it's being stolen anyway. If I want somebody to not have my data. I actually need to pay money to essentially wipe my information from all of these data brokers' databases, right? Where if I have my own account in Jasmy, let's say, you know, in a previous video, we covered that some people are paying up to $86 for essentially like an email list, right? $86 per email. Well, I'm not seeing any of that $86, right? I might be willing to take 50 or 40 or, you know, 30 or 10, right? Like everybody's going to have a different price, but let's just say I'll do it for 40. That's less than half of what data brokers were charging, and it's going to me personally, right? So this is kind of the free market competition side of things that I'm talking about, is because if we can see that data brokers can come directly to the source and they don't have to essentially pay for the overhead and the data and all of the things that it takes to run a data broker, not to mention profits on top of that, I would imagine it would be a lot cheaper for these people who are trying to acquire this data to just come direct to the source, which again beats out the notion of using data brokers to begin with, because those guys have to spend a lot of money to hijack our information anyway. So hopefully that kind of makes sense, is how I see Jasmy could replace data brokers, and why I think it actually would make a ton of sense, and it could be an incredibly valuable project as we kind of get there. So the last thing that I wanted to do is just go in and check out the Jasmy chart, because, you know, we all know I love looking at charts, and, you know, the Jasmy chart is no exception. Also, one thing that we did see happen today was, I felt like, pretty good news. At least so far, we do appear to be bouncing off of this trend line. This is holding kind of with, I would say, maybe the more bullish of the cases, because we are holding off of this, you know, straight bottom trend line, and we hopefully will continue to bounce off and, you know, maybe run back into the wedge. And then at some point, you know, again, this runs through, you know, the beginning of October. So we have essentially the next month to bounce around in here and eventually make a decision whether we're going to break up or break down. So that's kind of what things look like currently. Again, if we do break down, we do have this lower channel that we can still trade into, and that gives us time maybe out toward the end of October potentially, until kind of this larger structure is broken. But so far, this is looking good that it is breaking up off of this trend line. So, you know, this seems to be a pretty good area to, you know, potentially take a trade if you do like kind of day trading or swing trading Jasmy. This could be something where, you know, maybe we pull back up to this trend line and then come back down. Again, not financial advice. You need to make your own decisions, and ultimately, if you're not comfortable with like swing trading, don't do it. Trading is something that is very subjective and very personal to you. If you feel like you're good at scalping 1 minute candles, do it, right? Like, I can tell you from personal experience, I am not good at that, so I will not be doing that. If you happen to be good at swing trading or whatever, great, go ahead and do it. But ultimately, this is what Jasmy's chart looks like so far. So pretty good overall. You know, obviously we saw the pullback with kind of everything else in the market, but it is holding this trend line, which is good. I feel like this is a pretty strong, and it's turning to an even stronger level of support so far. So that's good. Well, that about wraps it up for the video today. Hopefully you found this information useful and helpful, learning kind of about data brokers more specifically, as well as Jasmy's place in the ecosystem. I do always like learning more and keeping up on such a project like this, that not only do I feel like has the opportunity to, you know, make us all a lot of money potentially, again, not financial advice, but it also is doing something that I think is a societal good and actually adds value to society overall. That's something that I really enjoy about the project. So if you did find this information useful, please do like and subscribe. It really does help me out. This still is a relatively new channel. I have seen a lot of growth recently, which has been very encouraging, but also I would like to see if I can get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of October. So if you do feel like I did a good job, please do subscribe. I do enjoy seeing kind of the growth in the channel. It also does make me feel good that I'm hopefully trying to educate more people about various projects within the crypto space, and hopefully provide a deeper level of analysis than you might see otherwise. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Please do leave me a comment if you have any questions or comments or feedback or anything that you think could help make the channel better, or if you just have anything that you wanted to share overall. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.